The parking lot behind Miller's grocery always looked peaceful at night. A single yellow street lamp hummed above the cracked pavement, casting long shadows that stretched like tired arms toward the empty road. The autumn wind carried the faint smell of pine from the nearby woods, and for a moment, everything felt still. But stillness can hide danger. A young girl, no older than 12, stood near the cart, returned with her hands tightly pressed against her coat. Her breath came out in shaky clouds. She was trying to pretend she was not afraid, but her eyes told the truth. She had been waiting for a ride home that never came. The first man stepped out from behind the dumpster, then the second, then the third. They moved like they had been watching her for a while. Slow steps, familiar smirks, the kind of men that town avoided by walking a little faster and looking a little farther away. Their voices stayed low, but something in their posture showed they felt sure of themselves tonight. The girl backed up until her heel touched the curb. Her small heartbeat echoed louder than the night wind. She whispered something to herself. A prayer, a plea, a hope that someone would see her. Someone did. A man stood near the entrance of the store with a grocery bag in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. He looked like any tired father finishing his errands after a long day. His shoulders were broad, but his posture remained quiet, relaxed. His beard carried strands of early gray, and the lines around his eyes showed years of discipline more than age. His name was James Hale. Around town, people only knew he worked at the auto shop on Maple Street. They did not know the way his eyes scanned every doorway, every shadow, every reflection in a car window. They did not know the reason he always stood with one foot slightly back, prepared. They did not know why he never took the seat with his back to the room. They did not know who he used to be. James watched the three men circle the girl. Most shoppers walking past pretended not to notice. A couple in a nearby truck locked their doors. A clerk taking out trash froze, then slowly stepped back inside, shutting the door with a quiet click. But James did not look away. The girl's voice broke. She whispered one line into the cold air with a tremble that cut straight through him. "Daddy, please help her." James was not her father, but he was a father. And some words are meant for every man who has ever carried a child in his arms. His grip on the grocery bag tightened just enough for the handles to creak. No anger, no rush, only a quiet shift in his breathing as something old and deeply trained awoke. Inside him, the men took another step toward the child. The night held its breath, and James took one step forward. "Let me tell you what really happened." The morning after the incident began like any other in the Hale house. Dawn crept slowly across the small kitchen window, painting soft gold over the worn wooden table. The kettle whistled its familiar tune, and the scent of fresh coffee filled the room. Everything felt peaceful, predictable, safe. James liked mornings like this. He moved quietly, almost methodically, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs across the table and folding a napkin with the same precision he had used long ago to fold a field map. His daughter, Lily, sat in her usual seat with her feet dangling above the floor. She was 10, small for her age, with bright eyes that softened the world around her. She noticed everything. James poured her a small cup of warm milk, placing it gently in front of her. She smiled without speaking. It was their routine, a comforting ritual that did not need words. Outside, the small town of Ridgewood was starting its day. The old bakery sign flickered awake. The school buses began their slow crawl through the narrow streets. A dog barked somewhere down the road. Everything about this place felt familiar, a place where time moved a little slower. James chose this town for that reason. He sat down across from Lily, watching her poke at her eggs. She lifted her head and studied him quietly, a habit she had learned from him. Her brow furrowed, as if she could sense something different in the air. She finally spoke. "Daddy, you look tired." James offered her a soft smile. He touched the edge of his coffee mug, letting the warmth settle into his hands. His body felt fine. His mind was clear, but his eyes carried something from the night before, something she had sensed even without knowing what happened. After breakfast, he helped her put on her school jacket and adjusted the collar until it sat straight. She laughed when he brushed a strand of hair from her face. These small moments were precious to him. They were proof that his life had changed, that he had chosen something gentler after years of living in places where gentle moments were rare. On the porch, James knelt to tie her shoelaces. His fingers moved with careful steadiness, though a faint scar near his knuckle caught the morning light. Lily touched it the way she always did, tracing the faded line with innocent curiosity. She asked the same question she had asked many times before. "How did you get this one?" James gave the same answer he always did. "Helping someone." She nodded, satisfied. She never pushed for more. She trusted him. As the school bus approached, Lily hugged him around the neck with sudden force. He held her a moment longer than usual. When she climbed onto the bus, she pressed her hand to the window, and he raised his in return. The bus drove away, leaving a trail of dust along the quiet road. The town may have looked peaceful, but something unsettled lingered beneath the surface. The night before had drawn attention. As James walked back inside, he moved with the same quiet discipline he always had. But now, every sense felt sharper. He noticed the unfamiliar car that had driven past twice already. He noticed the way a man at the diner stared at him for a second too long. He noticed details most people did not. These instincts never left him at the auto shop. The morning passed slowly. The air smelled of oil and metal. An old radio murmured soft country music in the background. James worked on a transmission with steady hands, forcing his mind to stay in the rhythm of normal life. Around mid-morning, the bell over the shop door chimed. A woman entered, mid-30s, nervous posture, eyes that carried worry. She held a small notebook pressed against her chest as if it were a shield. She was new in town. James had seen her at the grocery store before. Always quiet, always alone. Today she looked unsettled. She approached him with hesitant steps. "Sir, I hope I am not bothering you. I just wanted to thank you for what you did last night." He looked up, a soft shadow crossing his face. "I only stepped in because someone needed help," she swallowed, trying to steady her voice. Most people would not have. James wiped his hands on a cloth and nodded, keeping his posture relaxed. Her gratitude was kind, but he had spent years avoiding attention. He did not like people asking questions. The woman continued. "Those men, they have been causing trouble near the school. People are scared to say anything." James felt a quiet shift inside. The school, where Lily spent her day. His jaw tightened just slightly. He thanked the woman for telling him, and she left, glancing over her shoulder twice before stepping outside. Her reaction told him something important. The situation was not over. By late afternoon, James stepped out behind the shop to take a breath of fresh air. The alley was calm, filled with the scent of pine and dust, but there was movement on the far side of the fence. The same unfamiliar car from that morning sat idling, its engine rumbling low. Someone was watching him. James did not react. He simply noted the details. Driver's silhouette, vehicle make, partial license plate. The way the tires settled unevenly on the gravel. Old habits, old training, old instincts waking up. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across ridge, James knew one thing with certainty. What happened last night was only the beginning, and the men he stopped were not finished. The afternoon sun draped Ridgewood in a golden haze, turning every street into long streaks of light and shadow. Children's laughter echoed from the playground behind the school, but there was a quiet undercurrent that did not belong, a small ripple of unease that only some could feel. Lily walked home from school with her backpack slung over one shoulder. She noticed it first. 3 men loitering near the corner store. Their postures were the same as the night before, relaxed, yet predatory, the kind of presence that made people avert their gaze. She kept her eyes down, but a chill ran through her spine. Her steps slowed across the street. James watched from behind the shop window. He had been expecting this. Something about their movements, the way they lingered in the open without purpose, told him this was not random. The men had a pattern, a plan. He sipped his coffee, keeping calm, keeping still. His eyes followed every twitch, every glance. Ridgewood streets felt ordinary, but he knew better. Danger could wear a smile and carry a paper bag. The girl sensed it too. She quickened her pace, glancing back at the shadows in the distance. She whispered softly, barely audible, "Daddy, please help her." He did not move yet. He did not need to. His presence alone had taught Lily to be observant, to notice details others missed. The 3 men began shifting their attention, scanning the street, looking for any easy target. Their confidence grew with every passerby who refused to notice. The town had learned to look the other way. Everyone wanted to believe nothing would happen in Ridgewood. James exhaled slowly. He had always known that courage was not loud. It was quiet, measured, and sometimes it came from a single glance, a single decision. Before anyone else realized danger existed, Lily's small hand brushed against the edge of her backpack strap. She froze as the men adjusted their approach. She was 10, yet she understood enough. She darted her gaze toward the distant shop where James had told her to wait if anything felt wrong, and then the trigger came. A man reached out, trying to grab a paper from her backpack. His hand was sudden, rough. The instinctive flash of fear in Lily's eyes, the pure helplessness of her plea, sparked something James had buried long ago. Years of training, years of discipline, and decades of restraint surged forward. His heart did not race, but his mind focused. His breathing slowed, each detail sharpening like a lens. He could anticipate their moves before they happened. Time seemed to stretch. A passerby froze mid. A car slowed as the driver noticed the tension but did nothing. Silence filled the street, thick and heavy. No one intervened. They did not know how. James stepped out onto the sidewalk. The sound of his boots against the pavement was quiet but deliberate. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He moved like the wind before a storm, precise, measured, and unstoppable. The men paused, sensing him. Their confidence faltered. He did not speak. He did not need to. His eyes alone carried a warning they could not ignore. Lily's hand brushed against the pole of a street sign as if for balance. She watched him with wide eyes. Trust unspoken but absolute. He was her anchor. The first man made a move. His step was too fast, too eager. James responded in a heartbeat, his motion smooth and controlled. The world slowed around him, every step calculated. One movement to disarm, another to neutralize. He did not strike with anger. He struck with precision. The second man reached for her. James intercepted, guiding the man's momentum into the curb. A third tried to circle. He adjusted, closing the distance with economy of motion, making sure the threat was contained without unnecessary force. By the time it was over, the men lay scattered, stunned and silent. The street held its breath. Lily stood frozen, clutching her backpack, her small face tilted upward, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. James knelt slightly, putting himself at her level. He brushed a stray hair from her face. His voice was calm, measured. Quietly, he reassured her that it was over, that she was safe. Around them, the town remained still. No cheers, no applause. Only the weight of what had happened. The crowd, previously indifferent, now watched him with a mixture of fear, confusion, and respect. James rose slowly, his posture relaxed, his expression calm. Nothing about him had changed. The quiet storm had passed, for now, but deep inside, he knew the shadows had only begun to stir. The street was silent except for the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of tires on asphalt. James' eyes tracked the three men as they slowly regained their bearings. They had underestimated him. That was their first mistake. He didn't speak. He didn't shout. His hands stayed close to his sides, relaxed but ready. Every fiber of his body was alert, every movement calculated. The first man lunged toward Lily, thinking the previous encounter had been a warning, not a lesson. His motion was sloppy, desperate. James reacted in the same instant. He pivoted, catching the man's arm and redirecting it into the nearby lamppost. The sound was sharp. Metal struck bone, a brief, echoing note that cut the quiet. The second man charged from the side. James stepped lightly, his footwork precise, shifting his weight to unbalance the aggressor. In one motion, he twisted the man's arm and guided him to the ground. Not a blow, not a punch, just control, efficient, controlled, deadly in its simplicity. The third man tried to circle around, seeking advantage. James' eyes flicked once to the side, noting every detail, the curb, the man's center of gravity, the uneven pavement. In less than a heartbeat, he intercepted, using the man's momentum against him, sending him sprawling into the soft dirt by the edge of the sidewalk. Time seemed to stretch. 5 seconds, maybe 10, but every action was a choreographed moment of clarity. No one screamed. No one cheered. The world outside the small bubble of chaos slowed to a tense hush. Lily hid behind a newspaper box, clutching her backpack. Her wide eyes followed every motion, trusting him completely, knowing he would not let harm come to her. The three men struggled to rise, dazed, breathless. Their aggression evaporated in the wake of his control. James stood over them, calm, steady. There was no rage in his posture, no triumph in his expression, only the quiet certainty of someone who knew the cost of violence and the value of protection. The street was still again. The town seemed to exhale collectively. A car horn sounded somewhere blocks away, distant and insignificant. People who had watched from doorways whispered among themselves, eyes wide. They had seen what most never saw: true skill, unspoken courage, and a man willing to act without seeking glory. James looked down at the three men. They would remember the lesson. They would carry the shock, the fear, the knowledge that Ridgewood was not as safe for them as they had believed. He turned slowly to Lily. Her small frame trembled, but her face carried relief. He crouched slightly, brushing her hair from her forehead. Everything was silent again. Only the night wind moved, carrying with it a faint promise that safety had been restored. For now, James straightened. His breathing was steady. His face was calm. He had acted in 5 seconds, yet the weight of those seconds lingered. The men lay on the sidewalk, stunned. The child safe, the town quiet. The storm had passed, but in James' mind he already knew. This was only the beginning of something bigger. Something that would test more than skill. Something that would test the heart. By morning, Ridgewood had already begun to murmur. The story of what happened the night before traveled faster than the autumn wind through the streets. Shopkeepers whispered behind closed doors. Children repeated fragments they barely understood. The town had seen courage before, but this was different. James arrived at the auto shop as usual. The engine hum, the smell of oil and grease, and the morning radio created a fragile sense of normalcy. Yet he could feel the change in the air. Neighbors passed with sideways glances. Their expressions hovered between fear and respect, curiosity and gratitude. At the diner, people spoke in hushed tones, voices low enough for only themselves to hear. That man, he handled them like they were nothing. I never thought anyone would step in. James moved quietly through it all, letting the whispers wash over him without acknowledgement. This was not about recognition. It had never been. Around noon, a black SUV pulled up in front of the shop, the engine cut off with a soft thrum. From the back seat emerged a man whose presence carried authority. Broad shoulders, crisp uniform, polished shoes. His hair was gray but precise, eyes sharp, like someone who had seen the world in extremes and survived it all. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without speaking. A Navy Admiral, and he was looking directly at James Hale. James did not move to greet him. He simply stood behind the counter, wiping his hands on a rag, his posture calm and deliberate. The Admiral approached, measuring each step, studying him as though weighing a lifetime of choices in silence. When the man spoke, his voice was soft, controlled, yet carried a weight that made the room pause. "I know who you are." James raised an eyebrow, unflinching. The truth had always been in his eyes, even if he had hidden it from the world. The Admiral nodded slightly, acknowledging the restraint, the skill, the discipline. Ridgewood had witnessed only a fragment of it, but he recognized it fully. James Hale was not merely a man protecting a child. He was a former Navy SEAL, trained for missions most could not imagine. Lily had watched from the doorway, still clutching her backpack. Her small hand slipped into James without hesitation. She sensed the shift in the room, the weight of authority, but she felt no fear. She only knew that her father, or the man who had become her anchor, was safe, and that he had kept her safe. The Admiral's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Lily, then back at James. No questions were asked about the incident, no accusations, no unnecessary fanfare. He simply offered a silent acknowledgement that James' actions had been necessary, precise, and human. Word began to spread quietly through Ridgewood that day. Respect replaced judgment. People who had looked away now realized the quiet strength of the man who had acted when no one else would. The three men from the night before were now a cautionary tale whispered in the corners of the town. A reminder that courage can live in ordinary streets, in ordinary towns, in ordinary lives. James watched Lily from the counter, her small hand wrapped around his. He smiled softly, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. In that moment, the world felt small and safe. He had kept his promise without words, without boasting, without seeking recognition. Yet beneath the calm, a quiet hum of unease remained. The Admiral's presence was a reminder that the world beyond Ridgewood had not forgotten him, that his past had a way of reaching forward, and the choices he had made would never truly leave him free. The streets returned to their slow rhythm. The town exhaled, and in that pause, James understood something clearly. Courage may be witnessed by many, but true responsibility was never just about the moments the world saw. It was about every second that passed quietly before anyone noticed. When decisions weighed heavily on the heart, and James Hale had already carried that weight far longer than anyone could know. The afternoon sun had begun to fade, spilling amber light across Ridgewood's quiet streets. James sat at the small kitchen table, the remains of lunch forgotten in front of him. Lily's school books lay open nearby, but her attention was elsewhere, still clinging to the invisible reassurance of the morning's safety. The doorbell chimed. James rose slowly, moving with his usual quiet discipline. He opened the door to find the Admiral waiting, crisp and composed, but there was something in his eyes that went beyond respect. There was urgency, an unspoken call to action. Inside, the Admiral spoke without unnecessary preamble. "There is a matter that requires your expertise. Your past will make the difference. Lives may depend on it." James listened. His fingers rested lightly on the edge of the table. He did not speak immediately. His gaze drifted toward Lily, who had slipped silently into the room, her small eyes watching the exchange. The choice he faced was simple in words but impossible in heart. He could leave the town behind, the quiet safety of Ridgewood, and answer the call, or he could stay, preserving the small life he had built with Lily, shielding her from a world that demanded courage and sacrifice. He felt the weight of every mission, every loss, every decision from his past pressing down on him. The discipline that had served him in hostile waters now conflicted with the tender, fragile world of fatherhood. Lily stepped forward, her small hand brushing his arm. She did not speak, but her presence was enough. In that moment she became more than a child. She became the compass of his choices, the reason he measured risk, the reason he understood consequence. James exhaled slowly. He thought of the nights he had trained in silence, the missions no one would ever hear about. He thought of every life he had swore to protect, and the promise he had made to himself the night he had rescued Lily, even before knowing her. The Admiral watched him with patient understanding, knowing that the decision would not come quickly, that it required more than orders or logic. It required the quiet deliberation of a man who had already sacrificed much, and yet still carried the courage to do what was right. James finally looked down at Lily. Her eyes held trust, a calm certainty that he had been her protector and would remain so. He reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. "I will go," he thought, "but I will return." The Admiral nodded, understanding more than words could convey. The mission would be brief, precise, and necessary. It was not glory he sought, it was duty, and in that duty, he could honor both his past and his promise to his daughter. Lily watched him prepare silently, gathering a small pack with essentials, a reminder of the life he was leaving for only a little while. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the kitchen floor. In that quiet space, James Hale understood the essence of responsibility. Sometimes the heart demanded courage even when the path forward was uncertain, and the weight of duty was measured not in battles fought, but in the lives quietly preserved. And as he left the house, closing the door softly behind him, Lily whispered one thought to herself that would echo in him long after he was gone. "Please come back safe." He carried that plea with him, and it became the quiet engine of every step he would take. The morning was cold, with a thin mist clinging to the streets of Ridge. James moved through the quiet town like a shadow among shadows, carrying only what he needed, a small pack, his resolve, and the memory of Lily's eyes. He did not look for recognition. There would be none. Only results mattered. At the edge of town, the Admiral awaited with a small team, carefully selected and disciplined. James did not speak. He nodded once, acknowledging the mission, the stakes, and the unspoken understanding that lives could be lost if precision faltered. Preparation was methodical, almost ritualistic. Equipment checked, plans reviewed in silence, every detail measured, years of training resurfaced, each motion automatic but deliberate. He moved not for pride, not for adrenaline, but because duty demanded it, because someone would depend on him, because this was what he had sworn to do. The journey to the target was swift, quiet, almost invisible. James' senses scanned constantly. Footsteps, shadows, reflections in glass. Every detail accounted for. The world narrowed to the mission, the lives he had to protect, and the knowledge that hesitation could be deadly. When the confrontation came, it was over in seconds. He moved with the same controlled precision that had saved Lily, neutralizing threats efficiently, quietly. No unnecessary movements, no wasted energy, no bravado. Every step measured, every action effective. Time slowed in the moments that demanded it, and clarity became instinct. Threats were removed, danger neutralized, and those he had come to protect were safe. The mission complete, he retraced his steps, moving back through the quiet streets. No applause, no fanfare, only the faint sound of his boots against gravel, a rhythm that matched the pulse of responsibility. The world had not seen the struggle, the planning, the risk. Only James knew the weight of what had just passed by the time he returned to Ridgewood. The sun was low, painting the town in soft amber light. He carried no weapons, no prideful trophies, only the satisfaction of duty fulfilled. The quiet knowledge that he had done what needed to be done. The homecoming would not be celebrated with words. It would be silent, simple, and profound. Lily would run to him, and that would be enough, because for James Hale, protecting the innocent, honoring his promises, and keeping his daughter safe was the only mission that mattered. The sun had just begun to dip behind the distant hills, spilling golden light across the quiet streets of Ridgewood. James stepped onto the porch of his small home, the weight of the day lifting slightly with each step. The world was calm here, safe, familiar. Inside, Lily was waiting. She had finished her homework, her small hands folded neatly on the kitchen table, but her eyes never left the doorway. When she saw him, something shifted, an unspoken relief that flowed through her entire being. She ran before he could even reach the stairs. Her small frame collided with his, wrapping arms tightly around his neck. James bent down slightly, enveloping her in his own quiet strength. The warmth of her embrace carried everything he had fought to protect, the innocence, the trust, the fragile thread of safety he had built around her life. He brushed her hair back gently, resting his forehead against hers. No words were needed. The silence spoke volumes. It was a simple, the profound moment that carried more weight than any mission, any medal, any recognition from the world beyond Ridgewood. From the living room shelf, Lily picked up a small object, a worn stuffed bear. Its fur faded from years of love. She handed it to him, eyes wide. A token, a symbol of trust and connection. He took it with care, holding it for a moment before placing it beside his own few personal keepsakes on the mantel. James sat at the kitchen table, the evening light falling softly across his face. He poured 2 mugs of cocoa, handing one to Lily, and they sat together quietly. No need for elaborate stories, no need to recount danger or glory. They simply existed in the comfort of routine restored. Hearts still racing slightly from the shadow of what had come before. Outside, Ridgewood streets were calm. The town had witnessed courage, though few understood its depth. Respect replaced fear. But the quiet hero's actions remained unseen in full. That did not matter. For James, home was where the life worth protecting waited, where love and responsibility intersected, and where the weight of duty could finally ease. If only for a moment. He watched Lily sip her cocoa, the golden light glinting in her hair, and felt the quiet truth of his existence settle within him. Courage was not in the fight itself. Courage was in the choices made before and after, in protecting the innocent, in honoring promises, and in returning to warmth after storms. As night approached, James tidied the kitchen and checked the locks on the doors, his movements calm and deliberate. Lily yawned, stretching her small arms, and he lifted her gently, carrying her toward her bedroom. He tucked her in carefully, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and whispered quietly in the soft darkness, "I am here. Always." She smiled in sleep, her small hand still finding his, and in that hand, James held not only the safety of the night but the enduring, unspoken bond that defined his life. For a moment, the world was quiet, the house settled around them, and for James Hale this was the reward, the gentle, uncelebrated warm light of home. Morning returned to Ridgewood slowly, the streets bathed in soft sunlight that made the small town seem almost timeless. Life had resumed its familiar rhythm, The bakery opened its doors, the school buses rumbled along their usual paths, and neighbors exchanged greetings across picket fences. James moved through the day with quiet purpose. The weight of past missions, of dangers faced and lives saved, rested lightly on his shoulders, not because they had ended, but because he had carried them silently, without expectation of recognition. Lily skipped along beside him, her laughter spilling into the warm air. She held his hand as they walked to the local park, the simple joy of a child unburdened by the shadows of the world around her. He glanced down at her and felt an immense, quiet satisfaction, the knowledge that safety, love, and trust had been preserved. The town still whispered. People who had once avoided James now offered nods of respect, small smiles of acknowledgement. They did not know the full story, nor did they need to. The lesson lingered quietly. Courage does not always seek the spotlight. True strength often lives in silence, in restraint, in choices made for the protection of others. James paused at the edge of the park and looked out across the golden fields beyond. The wind brushed against his face, carrying scents of pine and autumn. His thoughts drifted to every life he had touched, every choice he had made, every promise kept. The strength, he understood, was measured not in battles fought for glory, but in quiet acts of responsibility, in steadfast protection, in the courage to do what was right, even when no one watched. He reached down, picking up a small stone from the ground, smooth and ordinary. He held it in his hand, a reminder that even the simplest things can carry weight, that the ordinary can harbor courage, and that the quietest lives often hold the deepest impact. Returning home, he found Lily drawing at the kitchen table, sunlight illuminating her work. He smiled, kneeling to place a hand on her shoulder. No words were necessary. In their quiet understanding, in their unspoken bond, everything had been said. James Hale had faced the storm, protected the innocent, and returned. And in the simple, the restored routine of life, of small moments, of a child's laughter, of a safe home, he understood the deepest truth of all, that real strength is not celebrated, it is lived. The day continued, gentle and unhurried, carrying with it a quiet promise. Courage would always be present in Ridgewood, not in loud proclamations, but in the steady, watchful presence of those who choose to act for what is right. And for James Hale that was enough.